Pierre Audemeyer. My name is Robert Howard, and this is my presentation on my personal OD method titled the Sustainable Action Model. I'd like to begin with a quote from Pierre Omidyar, who is one of the founders of eBay. He states that long-term sustainable change happens only if people discover their own power. It's very fitting for what we're going to talk about today, which is the Sustainable Action Model. So what is the Sustainable Action Model? Rooted in the research of the Action Model, the Sustainable Action Model focuses on engaging stakeholders in repeated cycles of reflection and action with a core focus on sustainability. The idea behind this model is that learning informs action and action informs learning, creating cycles of questioning and reflection, ultimately leading to the reframe of mental models. So, when is the Sustainable Action Model used? It can be used to address issues of sustainability in communities or organizations, focusing on developing and implementing new changes or addressing current policies and procedures. Organizations may also utilize the Sustainable Action Model. And we're going to go back. My name is Robert Howard, and this is my presentation on my personal OD method titled the Sustainable Action Model. I'd like to begin with a quote from Pierre Omidyar, who is one of the founders of eBay. He states that long-term sustainable change happens if people discover their own power. This is very fitting for the Sustainable Action Model. So what is the Sustainable Action Model? This is a model My name is Robert Howard, and this is my presentation on my personal OD method titled the Sustainable Action Model. I'd like to begin with a quote from Pierre Omidyar, who is one of the founders of eBay. He quotes that long-term sustainable change happens if people discover their own power. So what is the Sustainable Action Model? Rooted in the research of the Action Model, the Sustainable Action Model focuses on engaging stakeholders in repeated cycles of reflection and action with a core focus on sustainability. The idea behind this is that learning informs action and action informs learning, creating cycles of questioning and reflection, ultimately leading to a reframe of mental models. So when is the Sustainable Action Model used? It can be used to address issues of sustainability in communities or organizations. Organizations may use this model to create or draft current policies and procedures and define different sustainable alternatives to current policies. Organizations may also utilize this model when conforming to revised environmental policies drafted by political organizations. At the individual level, the Sustainable Action Model can be used to build a safer and stronger communities. There are many positive outcomes to the Sustainable Action Model. For the individual, this includes a greater understanding of one's own internal motivations. Every reframing of the mental models regarding what sustainability is and their essential. My name is Robert Howard, and this is my presentation on my personal OD method titled the Sustainable Action Model. I'd like to begin with a quote from Pierre Omidyar, one of the founders of eBay. He states that long-term sustainable change happens if people discover their own power. So what is the Sustainable Action Model? Well, the idea behind this model is that learning informs action and action informs learning, creating cycles of questioning and reflection that lead to a reframe of mental models. So when is this action model used? Well, it can be used in a variety of situations. It can be used with individuals to build a safer and stronger community. Organizations can utilize this action model when conforming to revised environmental policies drafted by political organizations. Organizations may also use this model when trying to solve issues of their own sustainable practices within the organization. For instance, sourcing raw materials. I shouldn't get that far yet. My name is Robert Howard, and this is my presentation of my personal OD method titled the Sustainable Action Model. My name is Robert Howard, and this is my presentation of my personal OD method titled the Sustainable Action Model. I'd like to begin with a quote from one of the co-founders of eBay, Pierre Omidyar. He states that long-term sustainable change happens only if people discover their own power. So what is the Sustainable Action Model? Well, the idea behind this model is that learning informs action and action informs learning, creating cycles of questioning and reflection, ultimately leading to a reframe of mental models. So when can this model be used? Well, the Sustainable Action Model can be used to address issues of sustainability in communities or organizations. Organizations may use this model when creating or drafting current policies and procedures to find sustainable alternatives to current issues. Organizations may also use this model when conforming to revised environmental policies drafted by local political groups. At the individual level, the Sustainable Action Model can be used to build safer and stronger communities. There are many positive outcomes to the Sustainable Action Model. For the individual, this includes a greater understanding of one's own internal motivations, a reframing of mental models regarding sustainability and what sustainability means to them, also an awareness of the individual contribution to sustainability initiatives. For instance, does an individual realize why they are recycling or why it matters for them to source green energy from a renewable source? For the organization, the Sustainable Action Model can lead to a positive impact on the bottom line of the organization. For instance, reducing overhead or becoming more involved in social responsibility initiatives. It can also lead to a reduced lead time on sourcing raw materials when organizations no longer have to source out rare deposits of minerals, for instance, like silicone. At the community level, the Sustainable Action Model can create accountability measures for local businesses. This can deepen relationships with peers and create the desire to maintain sustainable practices. So how does the Sustainable Action Model work? Well, to begin with, a sponsor frames a situation that is the current area for improvement, crisis, or pain point within an organization or community. The sponsor, with the help of the design team and key stakeholders from various positions, identify the systems, both internal and external, and any additional participants whose input may be required. This can include individuals from the community, individuals outside of the organization, and individuals from various departments within the organization. A call to action is then proposed, inviting stakeholders to explore the situation, engaging in conversation about what needs to be addressed and what needs to happen. Typically, this occurs in a large-scale change event style, similar to a World Cafe method. Stakeholders have conversations where they're constantly challenged to question one another's beliefs and preconceptions, surfacing their own assumptions and challenging others to do the same. After several rounds of small group discussions, action is then decided upon, through the creation of SMART goals to which stakeholders are held accountable. Following the initial intervention, communities of practice or peer groups are formed to create and support diversity and continued learning. With these peer groups, one mentor, usually a stakeholder from the design team, anchors the group with different participants from various backgrounds. These groups meet over time to discuss the current state and the actions that they are moving forward. Several technologies. These communities of practice meet continuously for a range of 3 weeks to 6 months. Following that time frame, one member of the community stays as an anchor, as all other members rotate throughout other communities of practice. Several technologies can be utilized in order to support the continuous involvement of communities of practice. Several technologies can be utilized to support and enhance the sustainable action model. For instance, computers can be used to Several technologies can be utilized in order to support the continuous involvement. Several technologies can be utilized from both hardware and software applications to support and enhance the sustainable action model. On the hardware side, things like computers, mobile devices, projectors, polling devices, and survey devices, and cameras can be used to graphically record and to collect data from the large-scale event themselves, as well as from the peer groups and communities of practice. On the software side, social networks like LinkedIn, Facebook, or an organization's own networking software can be utilized, as well as messaging services like group chats and SMS messages, brainstorming software like Affinity Diagramming, survey software like SurveyMonkey or Qualtrics, and even video conferencing tools like Skype or GoToMeeting can all be utilized to make sure that communities of practice and stakeholders who may not be able to physically be at the large-scale change event can still participate and have their input heard. The Sustainable Action Model has several uses across a variety of settings, including the retail industry, communities, and industry. The Sustainable Action Model has several uses across a variety of settings, including retail, industry, and communities. At the retail level, the Sustainable Action Model can be used to evaluate the supply chain and reduce toxic chemical use. Once the sponsor identifies the key stakeholders in the design team, communities of practice would meet every 3 weeks over the course of 6 to 12 months. Some key events in this process include the orientation, action, reflection. Key participants include the senior leaders, first-line supervisors, clients, and manufacturers. At the industry level, the Sustainable Action Model could be used to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. Again, teams would meet every 3 weeks over the course of 6 to 12 months following the large-scale change event. Key events are similar, with an orientation, reframing, action, and reflection. Key participants include senior leaders, first-line supervisors, and employees. At the community level, this same model can be used to preserve and protect the water supply within a regional community. Here, teams would meet periodically over the course of the project, constantly orienting, reframing, reflecting, and taking action on key steps. Key involvement is required from community leaders, community members, as well as local business leaders who may impact the water resources. Anyone can and should stand for making a more sustainable future for their community, organization, and just for the Earth. Coming to terms with the current state is difficult, but it is a necessary step towards progress. Through activities, reflection, conversation, stakeholders begin to examine the current state, taking a deeper dive into who is involved, what role those individuals play, and what resources are cannibalized in the process. To get started, follow these steps. Start with why. What is the pain point being addressed? Create a call to action. Bring on others who share the passion for the purpose. Incorporate stakeholders. Encourage others to reach out and extend the invitation. Define the situation. What is the current state? Frame the situation. Who is involved and in what ways? Where is their dissatisfaction with the current state? Explore. What is the vision for the future? What needs to happen? Reframe. What are the preconceptions, beliefs, and assumptions influencing your opinion? Is this better than it was before? Action. What are the first steps? How will action be supported? Support. Break into your communities of practice, your peer groups. Challenge one another to continue these cycles of framing, exploration, reframing, and action. And lastly, share. Engage other stakeholders, both in the system and outside of the system, and share your commitment to action. Encourage others to join you and support you in your choice. Individual stakeholders are the backbone of the Sustainable Action Model. Their commitment to making lasting change requires dedication to continually reflect and act, challenging themselves and their colleagues in the process. During the Sustainable Action Model, stakeholders are provided the opportunity to be involved in several other roles, including participating in the design team, or by becoming a mentor in a community of practice. Stakeholders should reflect on these roles and consider how this will challenge them and others they are impacted with. The old adage holds true. If you fail to plan, then you plan to fail. Individuals, organizations, and communities with the best intentions fall victim to poor planning and execution. While there is a large amount of effort to successfully launch the Sustainable Action Model, there is even more work required to sustain momentum and keep progress. The old adage holds true. If you fail to plan, then you plan to fail. Individuals, organizations, and communities with the best intentions fall victim to poor planning and execution. While there is a large amount of effort to successfully launch the Sustainable Action Model, there is even more work required to sustain momentum and keep progress moving forward. 4 key conditions have been identified to assist communities in moving towards a sustainable future. Provide context. Anchor the outcomes of the initial change meeting to the purpose or vision. Encourage contribution. Ensure all stakeholders have a seat at the table. Listen for patterns. Look for emerging things among peer groups. What are the commonalities and what are the differences? And foster relationships. How are stakeholders connected to themselves, the organization, and the community? The theoretical basis for the Sustainable Action Model lies in 2 key theories. The first is the World Cafe model. Originally developed by Juanita Brown and David Isaacs in 1995, the World Cafe emerged organically from the use of casual, guided conversation during a 2-day dialogic event. The World Cafe model is focused on 7 design principles. These principles are reflected in the Sustainable Action Model through the use of dialogic methods. The second key model is the Action Learning Model. The emphasis here is on learning while finding a solution. The Action Learning Model intends to help stakeholders address future problems through the development and facilitation of critical thinking skills. When progress is made, it's critical to ensure that the results are sustained over time. When developing the actions to support the sustainable initiatives, SMART goals should be developed, allowing stakeholders to see continual progress over time. These goals should be specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and time-bound. If you are interested in learning more about the Sustainable Action Model, I invite you to visit some of these organizations' websites to learn more about why sustainability is important, especially at this time. The Sustainable Action Model was largely influenced by my own personal bookshelf, including some of these books as well as some of these documentaries. Lastly, I leave you with this quote from William McDonough. He is a designer and architect who focuses I leave you with a quote from William McDonough. He is a designer and architect who focuses on creating a beneficial blueprint, very similar to the spirit of appreciation and gratitude. He states that sustainability takes forever, and that's the point. Thank you.